She was holding proof of a new life in her trembling hands, while the man she loved was kissing another woman in front of all of Manhattan. One positive pregnancy test, one public betrayal, and a decision made in the rain that would pull two people apart for months and drag them back together through blood, gunfire, and a love neither of them was ever supposed to have. This is the story of Nia Okafor and Kang Tae-jun. Watch until the end. Hit like, and drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. The test stick was still warm in her hand. Nia Okafor stood in a bathroom stall inside the Grand Meridian Hotel on Fifth Avenue. The noise of the charity gala bleeding through three sets of walls, crystal glasses clinking, a string quartet somewhere near the fountain, the low roar of Manhattan money doing what Manhattan money always did, which was announce itself without apology. She had slipped away from the event 20 minutes ago, told herself she needed air, told herself it was nothing, told herself the nausea she'd been swallowing for 2 weeks was stress and bad coffee and the particular misery of working 60-hour weeks at a flower shop while pretending she belonged in rooms like the one outside. She had not told herself the truth until the two pink lines appeared. She sat on the closed lid of the toilet seat, elbows on her knees, the stick held out in front of her like it was something that might bite. Her dress was a deep burgundy, floor-length, borrowed from her friend Camille, who was a size smaller and had spent 45 minutes pinning the waist. Her hair was pulled up, her nails were done for the first time in 4 months. She had gotten dressed in Tae-jun's apartment on the Upper East Side 3 hours ago, while he adjusted his cufflinks in the mirror and told her she looked beautiful, and she had believed him because she had always been stupid enough to believe him. 2 lines. She pressed the heel of her free hand against her sternum and breathed. Nia was 27 years old. She ran a small floral design business out of a rented space in Crown Heights. Lilies and peonies and eucalyptus arrangements for events she was never invited to as a guest, delivered in a second-hand van with a broken passenger side window that she'd been meaning to fix since March. She was good at what she did. She was precise and patient, and she understood how things grew, which was maybe why she had not understood Kang Tae-jun at all. Because Tae-jun did not grow, he expanded, absorbed, consumed. He was 34 years old, and he ran the most feared Korean criminal syndicate on the eastern seaboard, and he had walked into her flower shop 14 months ago because he needed an arrangement for a funeral and stayed because she still didn't fully understand why he'd stayed. He said it was because she argued with him. She told him his money didn't impress her, and he'd looked at her like she was a weather phenomenon he hadn't accounted for. She was not naive about what he was. She had learned, slowly and then all at once, the way you learn most things that frighten you. She had seen the men who followed him at a careful distance. She had watched him take a phone call at 2 a.m. and walk out of the bedroom with a face she didn't recognize, the face he wore when he became someone else entirely. She had asked him once, directly, what exactly he did, and he had looked at her for a long moment and said, "I run things." And she had said, "That's not an answer," and he had said, "No, but it's all I can give you right now," and she had decided that was enough because she was already in too deep to pretend otherwise. And now this. She exhaled slowly, stood, looked at herself in the small bathroom mirror above the sink. Dark skin, wide eyes, mascara holding on by a thread. The burgundy dress. The borrowed shoes. The pregnancy test in her right hand. She thought, I have to tell him. She thought, he needs to know tonight. She thought, we will figure this out together. She ran cold water over her wrists, the way her mother had taught her when panic came on fast, tucked the test into the small evening clutch Camille had also lent her, and walked back out into the gala. The Grand Meridian's ballroom was enormous and deliberately intimidating. 30-foot ceilings, chandeliers that cost more than Nia's building, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Fifth Avenue, with the park just visible in the dark beyond. The event was a charity fundraiser for some children's literacy foundation, the kind of thing Manhattan's elite attended to be photographed rather than to donate, though the donations were real enough when the cameras were watching. Tae-jun had been invited as a prominent business figure. He ran several legitimate companies in addition to everything else. Import logistics, commercial real estate, a restaurant group with 4 locations in Midtown. The legitimate world welcomed him because he was careful and generous, and because nobody in the legitimate world looked too hard at things they didn't want to see. Nia moved through the crowd with her clutch pressed against her ribs. She spotted his security detail first. 2 men near the east wall, too still, watching everything. She had learned to read the room by finding them first. She scanned past a cluster of city council members, past a television anchor she recognized from the local news, past a table of tech money in their expensive casual wear, and then she found Tae-jun near the far end of the ballroom, close to the windows. She stopped. He was not alone. The woman beside him was Korean, late 20s, dressed in white, the kind of white that photographed as luminous. She was laughing at something Tae-jun had said, one hand resting lightly on his forearm, and even across the crowded ballroom, Nia could see that she was beautiful in the particular, specific way that made Nia suddenly and viscerally aware of her borrowed dress and her broken van window and the precise distance between Crown Heights and Fifth Avenue. Nia told herself it was nothing. A business contact, a colleague. Tae-jun's world was full of people who touched his arm and laughed and leaned close. She had made her peace with most of it. Then the woman turned her face toward his and kissed him. Not a polite greeting. Not a European double cheek. She kissed him the way you kiss someone in private, the way you kiss someone you have kissed many times before, slow and certain, and Tae-jun did not pull away, and there were two photographers nearby, and neither of them lowered their cameras. Nia's clutch slipped from her fingers. She caught it before it hit the floor. She was not sure how. Her hands had gone cold and distant, like they belonged to someone else. The string quartet was playing something she couldn't identify. The chandeliers were very bright. Someone nearby laughed at something, and the sound was enormous. She watched Tae-jun's hand come up and settle at the small of the woman's back, easy and familiar. And she understood then with the clarity that comes only from the worst kind of shock, the kind that strips away everything you've been telling yourself, that this was not her world, had never been. That she had been filling a space that was already occupied, had been living in a version of the story that only she believed. The pregnancy test pressed against her ribs through the satin of the clutch. She turned and walked. Not running. She had just enough pride left for that. She walked through the ballroom crowd with her chin up and her eyes straight, and she did not look back. And she pushed through the side door into a corridor that smelled of industrial carpet cleaner, and she kept walking until she found a service exit, and then she pushed through it into the rain. New York in October hits different when you're already falling apart. The cold was immediate and complete, and the rain soaked through the burgundy dress inside of 30 seconds. And Nia stood on the sidewalk with both hands pressed flat against the building wall and breathed through her nose until the edges of her vision stabilized. Then she opened her clutch, took out the pregnancy test, and looked at it one more time in the rain. 2 lines. Still 2 lines. The rain was already blurring the paper casing. She thought about going back inside, thought about walking up to Tae-jun and the woman in white and making him see her, thought about the scene that would unfold, the photographs, the way it would become a story told about her rather than by her. She broke the test stick in half, dropped both pieces in a street-side trash bin, looked up at the rain. She had $53 in her bank account and a flower shop with a lease up for renewal in January and a van with a broken window. She had a best friend in Crown Heights and a mother in Philadelphia who had told her from the beginning that men like Tae-jun did not keep women like Nia. Not really, not in the ways that counted. She started walking. She walked 12 blocks in the rain before she found a deli, bought a coffee she couldn't afford, sat at the counter, and pulled out her phone. She had 14 texts from Camille asking how the gala was going. She had one from Tae-jun, just one, sent 20 minutes ago, that said, "Where are you? Come find me." She turned her phone off. Nia Okafor sat at a deli counter on a wet October night in Midtown Manhattan, soaked through to her skin, with her hands wrapped around a paper coffee cup and a secret she had already decided she was keeping to herself, and she began to build the outline of a plan. By the time the coffee was cold, she knew what she was going to do. She was going to disappear. She did not go back to his apartment that night. She took the subway to Crown Heights, let herself into her shop through the back because her keys were on the ring with the van keys, and the van was still in the parking garage near the hotel, and she sat on the floor between the work tables with her wet dress spread out around her, and she called Camille. Camille picked up on the second ring, the way Camille always did, and she listened without interrupting while Nia told her everything. The pregnancy test, the woman in white, the kiss, the rain, all of it. When Nia finished, there was a pause. "How far along?" Camille said. 6 weeks? Maybe 7? Another pause. "You need to tell him." "No." "Nia," I said no. Her voice was very flat. She'd burn through whatever was going to make her cry and come out the other side into something colder and more functional. He was kissing her in front of cameras, Camille, in front of the whole room, like I didn't exist, like I never... She stopped. I'm not doing this. I'm not becoming someone who chases a man who doesn't want her. You don't know that he... I know what I saw. Camille was quiet for a moment. So what are you going to do? I need to borrow your cousin's place upstate. Marcus's cabin. For a few weeks, maybe a couple of months, just until I figure out next steps. Nia, that's 3 hours north of here. I know. You're talking about hiding. I'm talking about getting space to think. You're talking about hiding from the father of your child. Nia pressed the heel of her hand against her eye. He was never going to be what I needed him to be, Camille. I think I knew that for a while, and I kept telling myself it was different, that I was different to him. She exhaled. I wasn't. The rain was still audible through the shop's single-high window. Outside, a truck moved through a puddle, and the sound was enormous, and then gone. The cabin has heat, Camille said finally, and Marcus keeps it stocked. I'll call him. Thank you. Don't thank me. Call a doctor first thing in the morning. I will. And Nia, turn your phone back on. Not for him. For me. So I know you're alive. She was gone before sunrise. She left the van in the parking garage, couldn't risk Taijun's people tracking it through traffic cameras, and took a Greyhound bus from Port Authority with a bag she'd packed in 40 minutes. Clothes, her laptop, the small emergency fund she kept in a shoebox under the workbench, a bag of silk ribbons she'd brought by accident because she'd grabbed the wrong box in the dark. She didn't own much. That had always been both the problem and the advantage. The bus was 3/4 empty at that hour, mostly overnight workers and college students. Nia sat in a window seat and watched Manhattan recede, and felt the particular kind of grief that doesn't announce itself as grief, that moves in quietly and settles at the base of your throat where you can't reach it. She was pregnant. She was alone. She was 27 years old, and she was sitting on a Greyhound bus in the dark with silk ribbons in her bag. And somewhere back there in the city she'd left behind was a man who didn't know any of it, and wouldn't miss her for very long because men like Kang Tae-jun did not run short on options. She put her head against the window and slept. Bes. Tae-jun discovered she was gone at 6:14 in the morning. He had come home to his apartment at midnight to find it exactly as he'd left it, Nia's coat on the hook by the door, her book splayed open on the nightstand, a half-finished glass of water on the kitchen counter. All of it suggested someone who had stepped out and intended to return. He had assumed she'd gone to Camille's, that something had happened to pull her away, that he would hear from her in the morning. By 6, the coat was still on the hook. The book was still splayed. The water was still on the counter. He called her phone. Straight to voicemail. Called again. Voicemail. He stood in his kitchen in yesterday's dress shirt with his phone in his hand, and a sensation he did not often experience and did not have a precise name for moving through his chest. And he looked at Nia's open book and the glass of water, and he called his head of security, a man named Cho Hyun-woo, who had been with him for 9 years. She's gone, he said. Cho did not ask who. How long? Since sometime last night. Phone? Off. I'll pull surveillance. Pull everything. The hotel, the garage, the subway stations. Every camera between here and Crown Heights. He picked up Nia's book, set it back down. And Hyun-woo. Quietly. Understood. He made coffee he didn't drink. He sat at his kitchen table and looked at nothing and ran through the previous evening in detail, and there were things he couldn't explain. The woman in white had been unexpected, had arrived with her father at the last minute, and the kiss had been her move, not his, and it had lasted approximately 4 seconds before he'd stepped back. And he had not seen Nia in the crowd, had not known she'd been watching. And he stopped. He thought about it. He thought about it very carefully, and then he called Cho back. In the hotel bathroom, he said. There's a trash bin in the women's restroom near the east corridor. I need someone to go through it. Cho was quiet for 1 second. You think she left something there? I think she went to the bathroom, and I think something happened before she walked out into the rain. I'll send someone now. Tae-jun sat at his kitchen table and thought about Nia's face when she was upset. The way she went very still, The way she stopped talking rather than raised her voice. The way her hands would flatten on whatever surface was nearest, like she was steadying herself. He had made her upset 3 times in 14 months, and each time she had gone flat and still and quiet. And each time he had needed to work for 2 or 3 days to get back to even ground. This felt different. This felt like something with weight to it, like something she'd decided rather than something that had happened to her. His phone buzzed at 7:45. A photograph. 2 pieces of a broken pregnancy test retrieved from a hotel bathroom wastebasket laid side by side on a paper towel. Both pieces showing the same window. Both pieces showing 2 lines. Taejun set his phone face down on the table and sat very still for a long moment. Then he stood up, buttoned his shirt, and began making calls. The cabin was north of a town called Millbrook, up a county road that turned to gravel half a mile before it ended in a small clearing with a woodpile on the left and a creek somewhere below in the dark. It had 2 rooms, a wood stove, and a kitchen with a propane range and a refrigerator that sounded like an old man clearing his throat. Marcus Delia had stocked it with basics: rice, canned soup, coffee, a few boxes of pasta, and Camille had called ahead to make sure the heat worked. It worked. Barely. Nia arrived on a Thursday afternoon and spent the first 3 days sleeping. Not the deep, restoring sleep of recovery, but the heavy, dragging sleep of a body in the early stages of pregnancy that had also been running on adrenaline for too long, the kind of sleep that leaves you more tired when you wake up than when you lay down. She ate crackers and ginger tea for nausea. She read through everything she could find online about first trimesters on a phone she'd replaced with a prepaid burner Camille had bought with cash. On the 4th day, she drove the rental car into Millbrook and found a clinic and made an appointment for the following week and sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes before she could make herself drive back to the cabin. She did not call Taejun. She did not contact anyone connected to him. She spoke to Camille twice a day, brief calls, keeping her voice steady. She told herself she was fine. She told herself this was the right choice. She told herself these things with the particular determination of someone who suspects they might be wrong and cannot afford to find out yet. Taejun had resources that Nia had underestimated. This was not her fault, precisely. She knew he was powerful. She knew he had people. What she had not accounted for was the specific, systematic way a man like Taejun went about finding something he'd lost. The cold efficiency of it, the lack of emotional interference, the way he could be absolutely ruined inside and still run an operation with the precision of someone who felt nothing. He had pulled her financial records inside the first 12 hours. Credit cards dark. The checking account she used for the shop. Nothing since the night of the gala. Her phone was dead. Her van was still in the parking garage, which told him she'd left without it, which meant she'd gone on foot or by public transit, which narrowed the geography. He pulled bus manifests, train records, rideshare data through channels that had no business existing. He found the Greyhound purchase inside 36 hours. Cash ticket, Port Authority to Poughkeepsie, purchased at the terminal counter. The terminal cameras had caught her face clearly enough. Burgundy dress exchanged for jeans and a dark coat, bag over one shoulder, moving quickly and without looking up. Poughkeepsie put her in the Hudson Valley. His people spread out through the region like water through a cracked floor. It took them 11 days. A rental car agency in Millbrook. A prepaid card with a zip code that traced back to a bodega in Crown Heights. Camille, almost certainly, careful, but not careful enough. A clinic appointment made under a name that was almost but not quite correct. The kind of error you make when you're frightened and moving fast. On the 12th day after the gala, Kang Tae-jun got in a car and drove north. Nia was in the cabin's small kitchen at 8 in the morning, standing at the propane stove in her socks and an oversized sweater waiting for water to boil, when she heard a car on the gravel road. She went still. Then she moved to the window. The car was black, long, out of place on a county road in October in the same way a foreign object is out of place in a body, obviously wrong to anyone paying attention. It stopped in the clearing and the engine cut off and one man got out of the passenger side first, scanned the tree line, and then Tae-jun got out of the back. He was wearing a dark coat and no hat, and his face was the face she'd last seen laughing with a woman in white under a chandelier, and Nia's hand tightened on the window frame until her knuckles went pale. She had time to run, she knew that, There was a back door and the tree line was 40 feet away and she didn't run. She wasn't sure if it was pride or exhaustion or something she wasn't ready to name. She set down her mug, ran both hands over her hair, straightened her sweater, and walked to the front door. She opened it before he knocked. Taejun stopped on the porch step. His security detail had stationed themselves at the tree line. She could see them in her peripheral vision, two shapes being pointedly unobtrusive. He looked at her. He looked at her for a long time, the way he sometimes did when he was deciding what was true about something. "You found me," she said. Her voice was steady. She was proud of that. "Took 11 days, he said. "Should have taken longer." "You used a burner registered to a zip code I already knew." She hadn't known he'd figured that part out. She kept her face neutral. "What do you want, Taejun?" He looked at her. Then he looked at her stomach, where the sweater was loose and unrevealing, and then back at her face. "You know what I want," he said. "Say it." He held eye contact. "You're pregnant." "Am I?" "Nia." "What?" "Don't do this." "Don't do what?" "Don't protect myself. Don't." She stopped. There was heat building in her chest that she had been holding down for 12 days, and she was not going to let it come up. Not here, not in front of him. "You drove 3 hours." "Yes." "For what? To drag me back to the city? To talk to you." His voice was quiet. That was the thing about Taejun. When he was serious, he got quieter, not louder. "That's all. I drove 3 hours to talk to you." She looked at him on the porch step in his expensive coat, hair slightly disordered from the drive, and she thought, he looks tired. The thought made her angry because she didn't want to feel that. She didn't want to feel anything that moved in his direction. "Come in," she said finally. "It's cold." He sat at the kitchen table that was also the only table, and she stood at the stove because she needed to not be sitting near him. And the propane burner was still going under the pot of water that had boiled and was now going cold again, and she turned it off. "The woman at the gala," she said. She was not going to warm up to this. She was not going to let him do it slowly. "Tell me about the woman at the gala." Taejun had both hands flat on the table. He looked at them. "Her name is Park Soo-yeon. Her father is Park Chang-ho. He runs the Eastern logistics chain for the Sungdo organization out of Seoul. We've been negotiating an alliance for 8 months. And the kiss was her idea. There were cameras. She wanted it on record that the alliance was personal as well as professional, that it had weight. Nia looked at him. "You didn't pull away." "No." "You let her." "I made a calculation." He said it flat, without apology, which was the only way she would have believed him anyway, because Taejun did not apologize for business decisions, not even when they cost him something. In the moment, with the cameras there and her father 3 feet away, I calculated that pulling back would damage 6 months of work. I made that calculation in approximately 1 second, and I made it wrong, and I didn't know you were watching. Would it have been different if you'd known? Yes. How? I would have looked for you first. She turned away from him and looked out the window at the clearing, the woodpile, the tree line going orange and yellow in the October light. The creek was audible below the hill, distant and steady. "I saw you and I thought—" She stopped. Her voice had done something she hadn't authorized. She pressed on. "I thought I had been a fool. For a long time I thought I had been a fool, and you just finally let me see it." "You weren't." "How am I supposed to know that?" "Because I'm here." His voice was still quiet. "Because I went through 12 days of hell and drove 3 hours up a county road to a cabin in the middle of nowhere, and I'm sitting at your table, Nia. I don't do that. I don't do any of this." He paused. "I don't know how to explain to you what that means within the context of who I am, except to say that it should tell you something." She turned back around. He was looking at her directly, and his face had something in it she'd seen only a handful of times. The face under the face, the one he kept behind the one he showed to the rest of the world. It was older and less certain and more honest. She exhaled. "I'm 8 weeks," she said. Something moved across his expression. He held very still. "Due in June," she said. "The clinic here confirmed it last week. Everything looks—" Her voice did the thing again. She overrode it. Everything looks normal. Taejun said nothing for a moment. Are you all right? He said. Physically? Nauseous, tired, otherwise fine. He nodded slowly. He was processing. She could see it, the way he went somewhere internal for a moment when something large came at him, the way he absorbed it quietly before he responded. What do you want to do? He said. I'm keeping it. I know. I mean, what do you want to do about... He gestured between them, a small movement. I don't know yet. She was honest about that because she was too tired to be anything else. I know I'm not ready to go back to the city. I know I'm not ready to... I need time to trust this, to trust you. I don't know if I can. I know. You can't just find me and expect everything to be... I know that too. She looked at him. He was watching her with an attention that was almost physical, the kind of focus he usually reserved for things that required it. And she realized that was what this was for him, that this was a situation requiring his full attention, his complete resources, and she was in the center of it. It was not comfortable, but it was something. I'm not coming back yet, she said. I need more time here. He was quiet for a moment. Okay. Okay? I'm not going to force anything. He stood slowly, and he looked tired up close, genuinely tired, the kind that sleep doesn't fully fix. But I'm not going away, Nia. I need you to understand that. I'm not going away. She crossed her arms. You drove 3 hours. I'll drive it every week if that's what it takes. She looked at him for a long moment, at his face and his expensive coat and his hands, and the fact of him standing in this cabin kitchen that smelled of coffee and old wood while 2 men waited in the tree line and a baby she hadn't planned for grew quietly inside her. She thought, I don't know what we are. She thought, I don't know if he can become what we need. She thought, he drove 3 hours. There's coffee, she said finally. It's probably cold by now, but there's coffee. He didn't smile, not exactly, but something shifted in his face, very slightly. I'll take it, he said. He stayed 4 hours that day. He did not push. He sat at the table with the cold coffee, and he asked her about the prenatal appointments, and whether the cabin had proper heating and whether she needed anything, and his questions were specific and practical, which was the only kind he knew how to ask, and which she found, against her will, reassuring. She answered him. They did not resolve anything. They did not make declarations. By the time he stood to leave, they had established nothing except the raw fact of 2 people in a kitchen with a problem and a beginning and a very long way to go. At the door, he stopped. The Park Alliance, he said. I'm going to restructure it. The terms don't require... He stopped. It won't look like that again. She met his eyes. Don't do it for me. I'm doing it for me, he said, because it was the wrong call. She watched him cross the clearing, get in the car, disappear down the gravel road. She stood in the doorway for a long time after the sound of the engine had faded into the tree line in the creek below and the ordinary sounds of a Tuesday morning in October, and she let herself feel the full weight of where she was, the fear and the exhaustion, and the small, unwanted flicker of something she was not ready to name. She touched her stomach briefly through the sweater. Then she went inside. She was making herself breakfast, eggs, toast, the kind of solid, ordinary task that kept the panic at a manageable distance, when her burner phone rang. Not Camille's number. Not a number she recognized. She almost didn't answer. She answered. Ms. Okafor. A man's voice. Korean accent, formal. My name is not important. What is important is that you understand that your current location is not as private as you believe it to be, and that there are parties with an interest in your situation who are not Kang Tae-jun. A pause. He has enemies, Ms. Okafor, and right now, those enemies know exactly where you are. The eggs burned. Nia stood at the propane stove with the phone pressed to her ear and felt the morning shift around her, the ordinary cabin sounds taking on a different quality, and she looked toward the window and the tree line beyond it. And for the first time since she'd arrived, the trees did not look like shelter. They looked like cover. The eggs were still burning. Nia didn't move to pull the pan off the burner. She stood with the phone pressed hard against her ear and listened to the silence on the other end of the line. The particular kind of silence that has weight to it, that sits in the space after something has been said and waits to see what you'll do with it. "Who are you?" she said. Not a question, flat. Someone who would prefer you stayed alive. The voice was measured, careful, the accent placing him somewhere between Seoul and American schooling. "That's not a threat, Miss Okafor. I want to be clear about that. I'm telling you because the alternative is saying nothing, and I decided I didn't want to do that." "How did you get this number?" "The same way Kang Tae-jun found your location. These things are not as difficult as people hope." A pause. "He just left. I know. I watched him leave. The two men he stationed at the tree line, they left with him. You are currently alone." The pan was smoking now. She reached over without looking and moved it off the burner. The eggs were black on one side. "What do you want?" she said. "Nothing from you. I want you to understand that there are people watching this situation who are not Tae-jun's people, and they do not have your interests in mind. Or the child's." Another pause, shorter. "Leave the cabin. Today. Don't tell Tae-jun where you're going until you're already somewhere else." "And I'm supposed to trust a man who won't give me his name." "No. You're supposed to make your own decision with the information I've given you." A sound in the background. Something indistinct. A door. A voice. "I won't call again." The line went dead. Nia set the phone on the counter and stood in the kitchen with the smell of burnt eggs and propane around her and looked at the window. The tree line was maybe 40 feet from the cabin's front wall. Dense enough. October bare enough that someone who knew what they were doing could move through it without being obvious about it. She had been here 12 days. She had thought she was hidden. She pulled out the burner, called Camille. Camille picked up on the first ring, which meant she'd been waiting, which meant something was already wrong on her end too. "Someone called me," Nia said. "On this number." "I know." Camille's voice was tight. "Someone called me too, 20 minutes ago, asking questions about you, asking where you were, how far along, whether you'd been in contact with Tae-jun recently. I didn't tell them anything but Nia. They already knew things. They knew about the gala. They knew about the test." What did they sound like? Korean, male, polite in a way that wasn't actually polite. A breath. "Who are these people?" "I don't know yet." She was already moving toward the bedroom, pulling the duffel bag out from under the cot. "I need you to do something for me." "Tell me." "Call Tae-jun." Silence. "Camille, you want me to call the man you've been hiding from for 12 days. "Yes." Because someone else found me first, and I need to know if he knows about them." She was folding clothes with one hand, phone wedged between her ear and shoulder. "His number is in the contacts on my real phone. I left it in the lockbox under the register at the shop. The code is—" "I know the code." A pause. "Nia, are you okay?" "I'm packing." She shoved the silk ribbons into the bag by mistake again, and this time she left them there. "Call him. Tell him someone contacted both of us. Tell him I need to know who the park organization is and whether they have people in the Hudson Valley, and tell him—" She stopped, zipped the bag. "Tell him I'm moving locations. He'll understand what that means." "What does it mean?" "It means I'm not staying still for someone I don't know." She slung the bag over her shoulder and looked around the cabin. The wood stove, the propane range, the table where Tae-jun had sat 4 hours ago with cold coffee and tired eyes. "Tell him I'll contact him when I'm somewhere secure." "And where is that?" "I don't know yet." She walked to the front window and looked out at the clearing and the tree line and the gravel road disappearing into the October trees. Nothing moved. "I'll figure it out on the road." She drove south for 40 minutes before she pulled off at a gas station diner that smelled of old oil and hash browns and sat in a corner booth with her bag under her feet and ordered coffee she didn't need and tried to think clearly. The Hudson Valley spread out in every direction around her, the kind of place that felt isolated and open at the same time. The mountains visible to the west, the towns small enough that a stranger stood out. She had thought that was protection. She understood now that it was exposure. Her phone rang, Camille's number. "I got him," Camille said. She sounded shaken in a way that Camille, who was not easily shaken, rarely sounded. "Nia, he—" A breath. He knew. He already knew someone had made contact. "What?" He said they've been monitoring Park Soo-yeon's father's communications for 3 weeks. He said the call you received came from a man named Lee Dong-hyun. He's a fixer. That was his word, fixer, who works independently but has done work for the Sungdo organization before. A pause. He said Lee calling you directly means someone in the Sungdo organization knows about the pregnancy and is making a move they haven't fully committed to yet. Nia's coffee sat untouched in front of her. What kind of move? He didn't say. Not to me. Another pause. But Nia, he got very quiet when I told him you'd already left the cabin. The way you get quiet when something scares you. Nia looked at the window of the diner, the parking lot beyond, the road. He wants to send people to you, Camille said. No. Nia, I'm not a package he can redirect. She pressed her thumbnail against the edge of the table. What does he want me to do? He wants to talk to you directly. He said, Camille hesitated. He said he can explain everything, but he needs to hear your voice to know you're safe first. She exhaled slowly through her nose. Give me his direct number, she said. Not the one I had before. His current direct line. Camille gave it to her. She hung up, looked at the number, looked at her coffee, looked at the number again. She called. He picked up before the first ring finished. Nia. I'm safe, she said. I'm at a diner about 40 miles south of the cabin. I'm alone, and no one followed me. How do you know? Because I drove in 3 different directions for the first 20 minutes and nothing held behind me. She paused. Lee Dong-hyun. Yes. Tell me. He was quiet for a moment. Not the hesitant kind of quiet, but the organizing kind. The kind where he was deciding how much to give her and in what order. She had learned to recognize the difference. Park Chang-ho, he said, Soo-yeon's father. Our alliance negotiation has been moving toward a formal agreement that would give him a foothold in our Eastern distribution network. There are people within the Sungdo organization who don't want that agreement to happen. They believe Chang-ho is overextending, trying to consolidate too much power, and they want to use leverage to stop it. And I'm leverage. Silence. You and the child, he said. She stared at the window. A truck pulled into the parking lot, a local plates pickup, a man in a work jacket who got out and went into the station without looking toward the diner. They were going to use my pregnancy, she said. To do what, exactly? Pressure me. Expose it publicly before I had control of the narrative. Force me to respond on their timeline. Pull my attention in a direction that benefits them while Chang-ho is vulnerable. He paused. Or worse. The pregnancy itself represents a vulnerability. An heir creates succession questions. Succession questions create internal instability. There are people who profit from internal instability. You're talking about them threatening the baby. He didn't answer immediately. Taejun. I'm talking about possibilities, he said. I don't know yet how far they intend to take it. Lee calling you directly suggests they want to create fear, not act. If they wanted to act, they wouldn't have announced themselves. That's very reassuring, she said, and her voice came out harder than she intended. I know. I'm 8 weeks pregnant, and I'm sitting in a diner because a stranger called my untraceable burner phone and told me I'm not safe. She pressed her free hand flat on the table. I left the city to get away from this. I left because I thought, I know what you thought. Don't! Her voice cracked on the edge of something. Don't tell me you know. You don't get to... She stopped, breathed. The diner around her was ordinary and oblivious. A man in his 60s at the counter reading a paper, a young woman refilling syrup containers behind the register. What do I do? Let me bring you somewhere safe. Where? I have a property in Connecticut. Gated, private. My people are already there. He paused. It's not the city. It's quiet. You'd have your own space. Your property. Yes. With your people. People I trust. She looked at her untouched coffee. The steam had stopped rising from it. If I come, she said slowly, I need you to understand something. Me being somewhere safe is not me forgiving you for the gala. It's not me deciding we're whatever you think we might be. It's me making a practical decision about the safety of my child. I understand that. Do you, Nia? His voice was very quiet. I'm not trying to collect you. I'm trying to keep you alive. There's a difference. She thought about the tree line behind the cabin. She thought about the burned eggs. She thought about 11 weeks of pregnancy ahead of her and a van back in a parking garage in Manhattan and a lease up for renewal in January and the particular weight of being entirely alone with a decision this large. Send me an address, she said. I'll drive myself. It's 2 hours from where you are. I know. Send me the address, Tab. The Connecticut property was not what she expected, which was maybe the problem. She had expected something that announced itself, something that said money and power the way Taejun's Manhattan apartment said it, all clean angles and art, and a view that cost more than most people earned in a decade. Instead, it was a low, wide house at the end of a private road, set back in the trees, the kind of house that chose not to be seen. Stone exterior, slate roof, a wide porch along the front, smoke coming from one of the chimneys. It looked, unsettlingly, like somewhere you could actually live. Cho Hyun-woo met her at the gate. He was a compact man in his early 40s, Korean-American, and he had always made Nia nervous because he said very little and watched everything. He nodded to her when she rolled down the window. Ms. Okafor, you made good time. Where is he? Inside. He asked me to show you to your room first. I'll find my own room. She pulled the car through the gate. Where is he? Taejun was in a room at the back of the house that was clearly where he actually worked. Not an office exactly, more of a command center that had been given a stone fireplace to make it look like something else. 2 men sat at a table with laptops. A large display on the wall showed a map of New York and its northern approaches, marked with points she didn't have the context to interpret. He stood when she came in. The men at the laptops didn't look up. He looked worse than he had at the cabin that morning. Not disheveled. Taejun was never disheveled, but tight across the jaw, the particular tension of someone managing too many things at once and aware that all of them could come apart. You drove fast, he said. Tell me about Lee Dong-hyun, she said. All of it, not the version you give people you're protecting, the real version. He looked at her for a moment. Then he glanced at the 2 men. Out, he said. They left without reaction. He moved to a chair near the fireplace, not the one behind the work table. A deliberate choice. She noticed it, and he knew she'd notice it. He sat down and leaned forward with his elbows on his knees and looked at the floor for a moment before he looked at her. Lee Dong-hyun is a contractor, he said. He doesn't have loyalties. He has clients. Whoever's paying him inside the Sungdo organization, I don't know yet who specifically, hired him to surveil you, establish your location, and report back on your condition and your contact with me. He paused. The phone call he made to you was not authorized by his client. He went off script. Why? I don't know. Maybe he has a line he won't cross. Maybe he wanted out and calling you was his exit. He shook his head slightly. Or maybe it was its own kind of move. Create fear, drive you toward me, watch where I bring you, map my resources. Nia sat down in the other chair across from him. Her bag was still on her shoulder. She didn't take it off. So by coming here, I might have led them to this location. This location is already known. It's registered to a holding company, but any serious investigation finds it. He looked at her. It doesn't matter. This is where I can put the most protection around you. That matters more than the location being unknown. You've had 3 hours to set this up. I've had 12 days, he said. I started moving assets the morning after you left. She looked at him. You thought this might happen. I thought something might happen. He held her gaze. I didn't know who you were going to be to me when we started, Nia. I should have been more careful earlier. I should have told you more. He stopped himself. She watched him do it. Watched him pull back from something he'd decided wasn't the right move right now. I made miscalculations. I'm correcting them. Miscalculations. She repeated it without inflection. I know how that sounds. How does it sound? Cold, like I'm running numbers on something that's a person. He looked at his hands. I don't have better language for it. I'm sorry. She watched him. In 14 months, she had heard him apologize twice. This was the 3rd time, and it was the most unguarded of the 3, and she didn't know what to do with it except hold it at a careful distance. I need a room, she said, and I need to know what happens next, not the reassuring version. I want the actual operational picture. Something shifted in his face, something that was almost the beginning of a different expression. He stood. Come with me, he said. He walked her through it like a briefing, which was the only way he knew how, which was fine because it was also the only way she could take it right now. They stood in front of the wall display and he pointed and explained. The Sungdo organization's internal faction, still unidentified, 2 or 3 key figures, operating without Cheng Ho's knowledge, or at least without his authorization. Lee Dong-hyun, located now in the city, his last known position placing him near Koreatown. Contact with unknown parties ongoing. The Park Alliance, currently suspended, Cheng Ho informed of the breach within his organization, his response still incoming. He didn't know, Taejun said. Cheng Ho. The faction moving against us is moving against him too. His daughter was used without his knowledge. The kiss at the gala was real. Soo-yeon's interest in me is real. The political theater around it was her father's strategy. What the faction did was use it as cover to expose you, discredit the alliance before it could be formalized, and create leverage against me at a moment when they believed I was distracted. He paused. They were partly right. Distracted by what? He looked at her directly. By you. And by the fact that I'd spent 12 days trying to find a woman who didn't want to be found and hadn't slept properly since the night she disappeared. The room was very quiet. Outside, through the high windows, the Connecticut afternoon was going gray and cold. A wind had come up and was moving through the trees beyond the glass. Nia looked at the map, at the points marked across New York's geography, at the intersecting lines of people and alliances and threats that had been building around her without her knowledge for months. I need to call my mother, she said. He nodded. And my prenatal appointment is next week. There's a clinic near Millbrook that has my file. I'll have someone transfer it. There's a physician on call here, board certified, obstetrics. She's been with us before. She's been with you before, Naya repeated. She treats my people when they can't go to a hospital publicly. He paused. She's good. I trust her. I need to meet her before she touches me. Of course. Nia looked at him. He was watching her with the same attention as that morning, complete, careful, aware of everything she did and said and didn't say. And she thought about how exhausting it was to be seen that precisely by someone you weren't sure you trusted, and how strange it was that the exhaustion felt different now than it had this morning, less like exposure, more like something she didn't have a word for yet. Taejun. Her voice came out quieter than she intended. Yes. If something happens to me, to the baby, because of your world, she held eye contact. I need you to understand that I will never forgive you. Not for the kiss, not for any of it, but especially not for that. He didn't look away. I understand. Do you understand that's not a negotiating position? That's a line. I understand. She exhaled, looked at the map one more time. Show me where the kitchen is, she said. I haven't eaten since the eggs I burned this morning. That evening, after she'd eaten and spoken briefly with the physician, Dr. Song, 50s, unimpressed by everything, which Nia respected, and established that the baby's progress was normal and that the stress of the day had not done measurable damage, she sat on the porch of the Connecticut house in the dark with a blanket over her shoulders and watched the trees. Taejun came out 20 minutes later. He didn't sit down. He stood at the porch railing with his hands in his coat pockets and looked at the same trees. The faction identified themselves, he said, an hour ago. They sent a message to Cheng Ho. She looked up. And? They're demanding Cheng Ho withdraw from the alliance. In exchange, they stay quiet about the pregnancy. He paused. If he doesn't, they're going public. She was quiet. How public? Every news outlet that covers organized crime in New York. Every rival organization that would benefit from knowing I have a vulnerability. He turned slightly toward her. They're going to frame you as leverage. An anonymous source confirming that Kang Taejun's hidden pregnant girlfriend has been living in hiding upstate because he's trying to control her. The trees moved in the wind. That's not what happened, Nia said. No. But it's close enough to be believable. Yes. She pulled the blanket tighter. The cold was deeper out here than in the cabin, a different quality to it, wet and heavy. She thought about her mother in Philadelphia watching a news segment about her daughter. She thought about her name in headlines she'd never asked for. What does Chang Ho say? Taejun was quiet for a moment. He wants to fight it. He's angry. He doesn't respond well to being backed into corners. And what do you say? Another pause. I say we don't let them control the narrative. We move first. He turned to face her. But that requires you to make a decision. She looked up at him. What decision? He held her gaze in the dark, and for a moment his face had that quality again. The one under the one, older and less certain. The story they're going to tell is one where you're hidden and afraid and under my control, he said. The only way to break that story before it starts is to let you be seen, publicly, on your own terms. He paused. You and I, together, in the city, not as a statement I make, as something you choose. The wind moved through the trees. Nia thought about the dress she'd borrowed, the gala, the chandeliers and the woman in white, and the 2 pink lines in a hotel bathroom, and 12 days on a Greyhound, and a cabin, and burned eggs, and the cold voice of a stranger on an untraceable phone. She thought about the baby, and the line she'd drawn, and the fact that she was sitting on a porch in Connecticut in the dark because the world Taejun moved through had reached all the way up a county road and found her anyway. She thought, there is no going back to before. She thought, there was never going back to before. Not from that bathroom, not from those 2 lines. When? She said. 3 days, he said. 4 at the most. Chang Ho needs time to hold his position, and I need time to arrange. No. She stood up. The blanket fell. Not as a show, not as a campaign. If I do this, it's on my terms and my timeline. You don't arrange anything. You ask me. He was very still. Are you asking me? She said. He looked at her for a long moment in the cold dark. Yes, he said. I'm asking you. She picked up the blanket, folded it over her arm. I'll think about it, she said. She went inside. Behind her, she heard him exhale, slow, controlled, the exhale of a man who had just discovered that the most difficult negotiation of his career was the one he was having on a porch in Connecticut with a woman in a borrowed blanket, and that he had no playbook for it, and that he was going to have to figure it out as he went. She heard it, and she did not let herself find it satisfying until she was already through the door and out of his sight. But she found it satisfying. She pressed her hand briefly against her stomach in the warmth of the hallway. 3 days. She would think about it. She was still thinking about it at midnight when her new phone, the secure one Cho Hyun-woo had given her before dinner, encrypted, registered to nobody, lit up with a message from an unknown number. 3 words. Don't trust him. And then, before she could respond, a photograph. Taejun. Recent. The timestamp read 6 days ago. Standing outside a building she didn't recognize, speaking with a man she'd never seen, and between them, visible at the edge of the frame, a document with a seal at the top and her name printed clearly on the first line. Her name. On a document. 6 days ago. While she thought she was hiding. While he was apparently already building something around her that she hadn't been asked about and hadn't agreed to and had not. Until this moment, known existed. Her thumb hovered over the screen. She did not sleep. She sat on the edge of the bed in the Connecticut house with the secure phone in both hands and the photograph open on the screen, and she looked at it the way you look at something that doesn't make sense yet, searching for the error, the angle, the explanation that rearranges it into something bearable. Taejun, outside an unfamiliar building, a man she didn't recognize, a document with a seal and her name on the first line. 6 days ago. While she was in the cabin eating crackers and drinking ginger tea and believing she was invisible. She enlarged the photograph with 2 fingers, trying to read the document, but the resolution broke apart at that distance. She could see the seal was official, governmental, or legal, and she could see her full name, Nia Adeze Okafor, printed in a standard serif font, and below that a line of text she couldn't make out, and below that what looked like a signature block. She set the phone face down on the mattress, picked it up again. The timestamp read 6 days ago, 11:47 in the morning. She had been at the Millbrook Clinic at 11:47 6 days ago, sitting in a waiting room with a number on a paper slip, waiting to have her pregnancy confirmed by someone who wasn't just a stick she'd bought at a pharmacy. She had been alone and frightened and telling herself she wasn't, and Taejun had been in New York, outside a building she couldn't identify, with a document that had her name on it. She thought about what he'd said on the porch. "We move first, you and I, together, in the city. Not as a statement I make, as something you choose." She thought about the word choose. She got up, crossed the room, and opened the door. The hallway was quiet. Low lights along the baseboard, the kind that stay on all night. Two of Tai Jun's men at the far end near the stairwell. She could see them as shapes, standing, not moving. The house made the sounds old houses make at night, settling and breathing. She went to find Tai Jun. He was still in the back room. She could see light under the door. She did not knock. He was alone, standing at the wall display with his jacket off and his sleeves rolled and a phone pressed to his ear. He turned when she came in. His eyes went to the phone in her hand, then to her face, and something in his expression shifted in the way it did when he was recalibrating. He said something short into his phone in Korean and ended the call. "What is this?" she said. She held up the screen with the photograph. He looked at it. His face did not change in the way a guilty person's face changes. It changed in a different way. Tighter, more controlled, the way it changed when something had gone wrong that he'd been trying to prevent. "Where did you get that?" he said. "Someone sent it to the secure phone your man gave me. The encrypted one registered to nobody." She kept her voice level. "So either your security has a hole in it, or someone inside this house sent it, and I want to know what I'm looking at." He crossed to the table and set his own phone down and stood with his hands on the table edge, looking at the surface for a moment. "The document is a legal filing," he said. "A petition for, it's a custody framework. Pre-established terms in the event of what?" He looked at her. "In the event that something happens to me." The room was very quiet. "You filed legal documents about my child," she said, "without telling me." "I filed protective documents. If I'm killed or incapacitated or taken, I needed there to be a legal structure that ensured..." "Without asking me." "Yes." "Without my knowledge." "Yes." He held her gaze. "I made a unilateral decision about something that involves you, and I did it because I was afraid, and I didn't think... You didn't think I had a right to know. I didn't think about your rights in that moment." He said it plainly, without softening it, which was the only version of honesty he had. "I thought about the child. I thought about what happens to children in my world when there's no legal protection and the father is gone. I thought about every ugly outcome, and I called my attorney and I told him to build a framework." Nia stood in the doorway with the phone in her hand and felt the particular quality of anger that lives right next to something else, something that isn't forgiveness but is in the same neighborhood. She did not feel it warmly. She felt it the way you feel a bruise, pressure, not pain, until you push on it. "What are the terms?" she said. "Full custody to you, no conditions, provision for the child's education, medical care, housing, a trust, structured so that it can't be accessed or redirected by anyone inside my organization. My attorney is the trustee. If I'm dead, he executes it. If I'm alive and you want nothing to do with me, you take it and go and I have no legal claim." She looked at him. "You gave up legal claim to your own child," she said slowly. "I gave you legal protection." He held her gaze. "It's not the same thing. I'm not giving up anything. I'm making sure that if someone takes me out of the picture, you're not left without resources and my people don't get any say in what happens to you or the baby." The wall display behind him showed the map of New York with its marked points. The fire had burned down to coals. Outside the windows, the Connecticut dark was complete and cold. "Who sent me this picture?" she said. "I don't know yet, but I will." His voice had gone flat in the way it did when something had already been decided. "Someone in this house accessed the secure phone's incoming data. That's..." He stopped. "That's a problem I need to deal with tonight." "Is it Lee Dong-hyun's people?" "Possibly, possibly not." He looked at her for a moment. "Go back to your room. Lock the door." "I'm not going to..." "Naya." His voice cracked slightly on her name. Just slightly, barely enough to hear. "Please, I need to handle this, and I need to know you're behind a locked door while I do it. That's all I'm asking right now." She looked at him, at the rolled sleeves and the tired jaw and the map behind him. "5 minutes," she said. "I want to talk to you in 5 minutes. When you've started dealing with it, not after. 5 minutes." He nodded. She went back to her room. She locked the door. She sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the photograph one more time and thought about legal frameworks and trust accounts, and a man who had built a protective structure around her child without asking her permission, and how that was both a violation and a desperate, graceless form of love, and how she didn't know what to do with those two things existing simultaneously in the same action. 4 minutes later, she heard voices in the hallway, not the low, routine sounds of the night shift. Urgent voices. More than two people moving fast. Then a sound she recognized from a movie she'd seen once and had hoped to never hear in real life. A gunshot. Close. Inside the house. She was off the bed before the echo finished. Her bag, still packed from the cabin, still by the door, old habit, was on her shoulder in 3 seconds. She pressed herself against the wall beside the door and listened. More voices. Running. A second shot, further away, and then shouting in Korean that she couldn't follow, and then silence that was worse than the noise. Her phone. She pulled up Taejun's number. He answered on the first ring. "Stay in the room." "What's happening?" "Stay in the room and away from the windows." His voice was the controlled version, the operational version. No room in it for anything except information. She could hear movement around him, other voices, something scraping across a hard floor. "We have a breach. Someone inside. It's contained, but I need you stationary." "Who?" "I don't know yet. Nia, away from the windows." She moved to the interior wall. The room had one window, facing the back of the property. She pressed her back against the wall beside the closet and looked at the door and breathed through her nose the way her mother had taught her and counted. 30 seconds. A minute. 2 minutes. Footsteps outside the door. She went completely still. A knock. 3 sharp, then 2 slow. Taejun's signal, she realized, the one she'd seen him use with Cho. She unlocked the door. It was Cho Hyun-woo. His jaw was tight, and his eyes were moving over the room in a sweep before they settled on her. "You need to come with me," he said. "Where's Taejun?" "Dealing with the situation, you're going with me to the secondary vehicle. Now." She looked at him. Cho, in 9 years, had never given her a reason to doubt him, had barely given her a reason to notice him. He was furniture, present, functional, invisible. "Show me your phone," she said. He looked at her. "Your phone. I want to see it." A pause. 1 second, 2. Then he pulled it out and held its screen up toward her. The last message on the screen was from Taejun, time-stamped 4 minutes ago. "Get her out. Secondary vehicle. Go." She moved. They went through the back of the house, through the kitchen, out a door she hadn't known existed into a narrow service passage between the main structure and a secondary outbuilding. Cold hit her face like a hand. Cho was moving fast and she kept pace, her bag clutched against her chest, gravel and dead leaves under her feet. The secondary vehicle was a dark SUV parked inside the outbuilding, engine already running. She got in the back. Cho got in the front. "What happened?" she said. "One of ours," Cho said, not turning around, pulling out of the building onto a service track through the trees. "Compromised. The phone, whoever sent you that photo did it from inside. We identified him 20 minutes ago, but not fast enough." "Is Taejun?" "He's fine." Flat, certain. "He's handling the debrief." She looked out the back window at the house receding in the dark. The lights were all on now. She could see shapes moving beyond the windows. "Where are we going?" "New York. His apartment. It's the most fortified option, and with the breach here, we're not staying." He paused. "He'll follow in 2 hours." She turned forward and looked at the service road ahead and put both hands in her lap and held them still. One of Taejun's own people had sold her out, had sat inside his house, close enough to touch, and fed information to whoever was on the other side of this. And she had been sleeping 20 feet away with her bag packed and a baby she was trying to protect, and no idea. She pressed one hand flat against her stomach. The SUV moved through the Connecticut dark toward the highway. She was in the Manhattan apartment by 2 a.m. She'd been here before, many times, in what felt now like a different life. The apartment on the Upper East Side with the art and the view and her borrowed coat on the hook by the door. But it was different tonight, filled with people who moved through it with purpose, who spoke in short sentences and looked at screens and treated the space as an operations room rather than a home. Cho put her in the bedroom and closed the door, and she sat on the edge of the bed, Taijun's bed, which smelled of him, which she noticed and resented noticing, and waited. Taejun arrived at 3:40 a.m. She heard the door, heard Cho's voice, and then his, heard the apartment shift its energy the way it always did when he entered a room, everything orienting slightly toward him. He came into the bedroom, closed the door, looked at her. There was a cut above his left eyebrow, taped with a butterfly bandage that hadn't been done carefully. His coat was on. He hadn't taken it off yet, which meant he'd come straight here. "Tell me," she said. He sat in the chair across from her, not on the bed beside her, which she registered as deliberate and correct. He leaned forward with his elbows on his knees. "His name is Baek Joon Seo," he said. "He's been with me 4 years, recruited out of a crew in Flushing, reliable, good at close work." He paused. "He's been on the Sungdo faction's payroll for the last 8 months. 8 months. Since before I even met Chang-ho formally, before the alliance negotiations started." He looked at the floor. "He wasn't activated until 3 weeks ago, when they confirmed the pregnancy through Lee's surveillance. She absorbed that. So he's been in your house for 8 months waiting." "Yes." "Attending your meetings, knowing your locations." "Yes." "And now he's in custody. Mine." His voice was flat and did not invite follow-up questions on that topic, and she did not ask them. She looked at him, the taped cut, the coat still on. "What did he tell the faction?" she said. Taejun was quiet for a moment. "This location, my attorney's name, the structure of the custody filing." She felt something cold move through her. "They know about the filing." "Yes." "Which means they know you've already established legal protections for the baby, and for me." She thought through it. "Which means their leverage calculation just changed. They can't just threaten to go public anymore. If there's a legal record of you trying to protect us, the narrative of you controlling me falls apart." He looked up at her. Something in his expression changed. "Yes," he said. "That's right. So what did they do instead?" He didn't answer immediately. "Taejun," her voice was very quiet. "What do they do instead of going public?" "They stop using you as leverage," he said, "and they start using you as a target." The apartment was silent around them. Somewhere outside, Manhattan went on being Manhattan. Sirens, distant, a car horn, the particular frequency of a city that never fully sleeps. Nia sat very still. "How long have you known that was the likely progression?" she said. "Since Baek was identified. About 6 hours ago." 6 hours. "I was dealing with the breach." "I've been in this apartment for over an hour, Taejun. You've had 40 minutes since you arrived to tell me this." He held her gaze. "I know." "You were going to—" She stopped. Something was rising in her chest that wasn't quite anger, that was something beneath anger, something older and more fundamental. "You were going to manage how you told me. You were going to find the right framing. I was going to make sure I wasn't telling you something terrifying before I knew what I could offer alongside it." "I don't need you to manage what I can handle." Her voice was sharp now. "I am 8 weeks pregnant, and I have been awake for 20 hours, and I have been in a car twice, and I heard a gunshot in a house where I was supposed to be safe, and I am sitting on your bed at 4 in the morning, Taejun. You do not get to decide what I'm ready to hear." He said nothing. He let her have it, which was either wisdom or strategy, and she couldn't tell which, and that was part of the problem. "Someone wants to hurt me," she said. "Someone wants to hurt the baby, not to use us. To hurt us, to get to you." "Yes. And you brought me to the most identifiable address associated with you in the entire city." He looked at her. "I brought you to the most defensible position. There's a difference. You keep making that distinction, because it keeps being true." She stood up. She couldn't sit still anymore. She walked to the window, not in front of it, beside it, the way he'd always told her to stand near windows in places that made him careful, and looked out at the city below. The Upper East Side at 4 in the morning, quiet by Manhattan standards, the park visible in the dark beyond. "What do you need from me?" she said. "Operationally. What do you actually need?" He was quiet for a moment behind her. She could hear him thinking, the particular texture of his silence when he was deciding how much to say. "I need you visible," he said. "Publicly, controlled, on our terms. It disrupts their plan. If you appear strong and present and not hidden, The target framing loses its power. You can't be a vulnerability they exploit if you're standing in the open. She turned around. And if they decide the open is exactly where they want me, then I'll be standing next to you. She looked at him. The cut, the coat, the exhausted eyes. That's not a guarantee, she said. No, it's not. She crossed her arms. I want to call my mother. Of course. I want Dr. Song here, today. I'll arrange it. And I want to see the legal documents, all of them. Everything your attorney filed. I want to read every word. I'll have them sent over in the morning. She uncrossed her arms. You should have told me about those documents the moment you filed them. I know. That's not a small thing. That's my name on a legal document about my child. I know, Nia. If you make another decision like that without telling me, I won't. You said that like it's simple. It's not simple. He stood up. He finally took his coat off, dropped it over the back of the chair. It's a thing I have to actively choose against my instinct, which is to handle problems before they reach you because I'm afraid of what reaching you means. It's something I have to relearn every time. He looked at her. I'm telling you that because you said you wanted the real version, not the managed one. She looked at him for a long moment. Go get that cut properly seen to, she said. That tape job is terrible. Something crossed his face, not quite a smile. There's a first aid kit in the bathroom, he said. I know where it is. She went to the bathroom, got the kit, came back. He sat in the chair and she stood in front of him and removed the butterfly bandage and cleaned the cut properly, and neither of them spoke. And outside the city went quiet in the particular way it does in the last hour before dawn, when even New York runs low on noise. His hands were on his knees, very still. Does it hurt? She said. No. Don't lie. A little, he said. She taped it correctly, stepped back. Get some sleep, she said. Whatever sleep you can. She went back to the bed, pulled the blanket over herself still dressed, and turned off the lamp. Across the room, she heard him sit for a while without moving. Then she heard him move to the couch. He had not assumed the bed was available, and the sound of him settling, and then quiet. She lay in the dark and thought about documents with her name on them, and gunshots inside houses, and the city below the window, and the way it felt to clean a cut on someone's face, the intimacy of it, the strange domesticity in the middle of everything. She thought, something has changed. She thought, I don't know if the change is survivable. She put her hand on her stomach in the dark and felt the ordinary warmth of her own body, and eventually, in spite of everything, she slept. She woke to daylight and voices, not alarmed voices, the clipped professional sound of Taijun's people conducting morning business, phones, and low conversations, and the smell of coffee from somewhere. She checked her phone. 8:14 a.m. 4 hours of sleep. She lay still for a moment and listened to the apartment and knew without seeing it that the couch across the room was empty, that he'd been up for hours already. She got up, used the bathroom, splashed water on her face and looked at herself in the mirror and looked away. She went to find coffee. The apartment's main room had been converted overnight. A folding table along one wall with laptops and equipment she didn't recognize. Two men she hadn't seen before, younger, working. Cho near the window with a phone to his ear. Taijun at the kitchen island with a coffee cup and a stack of papers, already in a fresh shirt, the taped cut visible above his eyebrow. He looked up when she came in. Coffee's made, he said. She poured herself a cup, stood at the counter and drank it. The documents from your attorney, she said. He pushed the stack toward her without comment. She picked them up and began reading, and he let her, went back to whatever he was working on, and the apartment moved around them. She read for 20 minutes. The documents were what he'd described. A custody framework, comprehensive. Her name throughout as sole custodial guardian with no conditions. The trust was structured through a law firm she didn't know in an account she had no prior connection to. There was a provision for the baby's name, left blank, with a notation that it was her choice entirely. Her choice, written into the document, at the sole discretion of the mother. She set the papers down. The man who took the photo, she said. Baek Junseo. Taejun looked up. He knew about these documents. Yes. And he told the faction. Yes. which means the faction knows you've already decided that if you die, I have everything and they have nothing. She looked at him. You made yourself a less effective hostage. If they take you, or threaten to, I don't have to come running because you've already given me what I need without them. He held her gaze. That was part of the calculation, he said. She set the coffee cup down. You built a legal firewall, she said slowly, not just for the baby, for the leverage. If they take you, I don't negotiate. I don't pay. I walk away with the child and everything is already in place. They get nothing from taking you because your existence is no longer the sole source of our security. Correct? They would have figured that out when they got the documents from Beck. Yes. Which means the plan changed to targeting us not because we became vulnerable, she said, but because you made us too secure. Her voice was very even. You removed the leverage, and they panicked. He was looking at her with an expression she hadn't seen before, something precise and evaluating. Yes, he said. You could have explained that. Last night, in that room, I wasn't sure you'd hear the logic over the breach. Try me next time. She picked up her coffee. Who is the faction's actual leader? Not the proxies, not Lee, not Bayek. Who's running this? He paused. I have a name, he said slowly. I've had it since early this morning. She waited. Han Sung-il, he said. He's Chang Ho's brother-in-law. He's been positioning for 2 years to take over Sungdo's New York operations. If the Chang Ho alliance goes through with me, Han's position inside the organization becomes untenable. He set his coffee down. He's not trying to protect Sungdo. He's trying to protect his place inside it. And Chang Ho doesn't know. Chang Ho didn't know. He paused. He knows now. I told him 2 hours ago. Nia was quiet. What did he say? He said... Taejun stopped. Something crossed his face. He said he'll handle his own family. Those were his exact words. She absorbed that. Is that a problem? It depends on what handling means to a man like Chang Ho when it's his wife's brother. She looked at him. He might not go hard enough. He might not go hard enough, he agreed. She set her coffee down, which means Han Sung-il is still a threat regardless. Yes, even after whatever Chang Ho does. Especially after. A man like Han, exposed and embarrassed inside his own organization, is more dangerous than a man with a plan. He has nothing left to lose and he knows where we are. The apartment was very quiet for a moment, despite the people in it. Nia looked out the window at the Upper East Side morning. A normal Wednesday in Manhattan. The park, the traffic, the ordinary human movement of people who did not know that the woman standing at the kitchen island of a penthouse apartment was 8 weeks pregnant and had slept 4 hours, and was trying to think clearly about the threat geometry of a Korean crime faction while drinking her first coffee of the day. She thought about the outline of what she knew. Han Seong-il running out of moves, exposed, with access to Lee Dong-hyun and whatever other contractors Sungdo's money could reach. Taejun, his defenses solid, but with a confirmed breach in his inner circle. Herself, public appearance still unmade, narrative still in play. She thought about what Taejun had said on the porch. You and I, together, in the city. She had said she would think about it. She turned around. Set up the appearance, she said. He looked up. You said 3 days, 4 at most. Do it in 2. She held his gaze. If Han is running out of time and options, we want to move while he's still recalculating, not after he's committed to something. Taejun was very still. You're sure, he said. No. But I'm making the decision anyway. She picked up her coffee again. And Taejun, I choose the venue. I choose what I wear. I choose what we say and what we don't. This is my appearance, not yours. He held her gaze for a long moment. Agreed, he said. She nodded. Turned back to the window. Behind her, she heard him make a call. Short, sharp, Korean. And the apartment shifted again, the operational energy reorganizing around a new timeline. She sipped her coffee and looked at the park and thought about the document with her name on it and the blank line where the baby's name was supposed to go and the word mother in a legal font she hadn't chosen. And she thought that it was the strangest thing in the world to feel both entirely alone and completely surrounded at the same moment. Her phone buzzed. A message. The compromised secure phone which Cho had confiscated. This was her personal line. a number she didn't recognize. She opened it. A video. 11 seconds. No audio. She pressed play. The footage was from a security camera, grainy, time-stamped from 2 hours ago, 6:23 a.m. She recognized the angle, the parking structure near the Grand Meridian Hotel, where her van had been sitting for 2 weeks. The van was still there. And next to the van, visible for 4 seconds before they moved out of frame, two men were doing something to the driver's side door. Not breaking in, not stealing it, attaching something, working carefully and quickly, the practiced speed of people who had done this before. The video ended. She stood at the window with the phone in her hand and looked at the parking structure footage and understood with a clarity that was almost physical what she was looking at. They were not going to wait for the public appearance. They were not going to wait for her to step into the open on her own terms. They had already moved 6 hours ago in the dark of a parking structure in Midtown, and they had moved not against Tai-Jun, but against her van. Her van with the broken window and the Brooklyn address on the registration and the phone number of her shop on the side. The van that was the most obvious point of connection between her and the life she'd had before all of this started. The van she had planned to retrieve tomorrow. The van she had mentioned to Tai-Jun in this apartment 2 hours ago. Someone in this apartment had heard her. She turned around slowly. The room was the same as it had been 60 seconds ago. The folding table, the laptops, the two younger men, Cho at the window, Tai-Jun at the island. All of it the same. All of it wrong. She looked at Tai-Jun and he read her face the way he read everything. Fast, completely. And he was already moving toward her when she held up the phone and pressed play and let him watch the 11 seconds of footage. And she watched his face as he watched it and saw the moment he understood, and the moment after that when he understood the second thing, the same thing she had understood, the thing that made the room feel suddenly very small. Baek Jun-so was in custody. The breach was supposedly sealed, but the footage was from 2 hours ago, which meant there was someone else, which meant the breach was not sealed at all, which meant that somewhere in the controlled, fortified, trusted circle of people that Kang Tai-Jun had built over 9 years, there was still a door standing open. And on the other side of it, Han Sung-il was already walking through. Tai-Jun moved first. He crossed the room in 4 strides and had Cho by the arm before Cho had finished turning from the window, and he said something in Korean, low and fast, and Cho's face went through 3 expressions in 2 seconds. Confusion, then understanding, then the flat professional blankness of a man switching modes. The 2 younger men at the folding table looked up. "Out," Tai-Jun said. English, for her benefit. "Both of you. Hallway. Now." They moved without question. The door closed behind them. Tai-Jun stood in the center of the room with Cho and looked at him with the specific quality of attention he gave to things that required complete focus, and Nia stood at the window with her phone still warm in her hand and watched the 2 men look at each other and understood that she was witnessing something that did not usually have witnesses. "The van footage," Tai-Jun said. "Who in this apartment knew she was going to retrieve it?" Cho's jaw was tight. "You mentioned it at the island. I was at the window. The 2 men were at the table. Who else?" "No one else was in the room." "One of those 2 men." "Or the line was tapped." Cho's voice was level. "If the secure system was compromised at the Connecticut house, the assumption should be that I have another problem inside my own walls." Tai-Jun's voice was very quiet. The quiet that was worse than volume. "Pull both of their files. Full background. Last 6 months of financials. Every contact logged. I want it in 20 minutes. "Already moving," Cho said, and stepped away with his phone. Tai-Jun turned to Nia. She held up a hand. "Don't tell me to go back to the bedroom." "I wasn't going to." "Good." She set her phone on the counter. "Han Sung-il knows where we are. He knew about the van before we did, which means he's been ahead of us by at least 1 step since last night. The breach in Connecticut was Baek. The breach here is someone else." She looked at him. "How many people know this address?" 30, maybe 35. "How many are inside this building right now?" 7, including Cho. "You trust Cho?" "With everything." "The other 6. He was quiet for a moment. "I trusted all of them before this morning." She looked at him steadily. "That's not an answer to my question." He held her gaze. "I don't know. Not anymore." She nodded once. She picked up her coffee cup, looked at it, set it back down. Her stomach was doing the thing it did in the mornings, the low, persistent nausea that had become background noise over the past week. And she breathed through it the way she'd learned to and focused. Han is going to move today, she said. Not tomorrow. Not in 2 days. Today. Because he knows the appearance we were going to set up, and he knows it disrupts him, and he knows we know about the van, which means he knows his window is closing. Agreed. Which means we need to move first. But not the appearance. Not a controlled public event we've had 2 days to plan. That's too slow now, and he'll see it coming. She looked at the window, at the park, at the ordinary morning that had no idea. We need to do something he doesn't expect. Taejun crossed to the island and stood across from her. What are you thinking? I'm thinking you have a problem, and the problem is that Han has been 2 steps ahead because he has a source inside. And you can't solve the source problem in time to solve the Han problem. She met his eyes. So you use it. A pause. You use the source, she said. You feed them something. Something big enough that Han commits to it, moves his people, shows himself fully. And when he does, we're already there. Taejun was looking at her with the focused, evaluating expression. The one she was learning meant he was taking something seriously. You're talking about a controlled burn. I'm talking about giving Han exactly what he wants, one time, in a place and a time that we choose. He was quiet for a long moment. If it goes wrong, he said. I know. Nia, if it goes wrong, there's no... I know. Her voice was flat. I'm not asking you to put me in the middle of it. I'm asking you to think about whether there's a version of this where Han moves on a location we control, at a time we control, with people in place. She held eye contact. Because the alternative is waiting for him to move on a location and time he controls. And I've seen how that goes. Last night, Connecticut. Taejun looked at his hands on the island, looked up. The location would have to be somewhere Han already has access to, he said slowly. Somewhere believable. If we manufacture a location out of nowhere, he'll smell it. Is there somewhere like that? He was quiet for a moment, then, my restaurant, Hangang, on 52nd. Han's people have been watching it for 6 weeks. It's on our surveillance of their surveillance. It's the most public of my legitimate operations, and it's been a known pressure point. He paused. If Cho lets it slip through the right channel that I'm going there this morning, a meeting, something that sounds urgent and unplanned, Han will move on it. How long to get your people in place? 90 minutes. And the source inside this apartment, I feed them the information in 60 minutes. That gives Han 30 minutes to react and mobilize, which is tight, but not impossibly tight for a man who's already got people on standby. He looked at her. It's a real risk. If his response is faster than we account for, or if he brings more people than we expect, or if the person inside this apartment is someone you'd have in that restaurant. He held very still. That too, he said. She pressed her thumbnail against the edge of the counter. The nausea was still there. Background. Manageable. Her hands were steady. She noticed that and filed it away. Make the call, she said. I'll stay here with Cho. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached across the island and picked up his phone. The next 90 minutes were the strangest of her life. She sat at the kitchen island and ate toast she'd made herself because no one else thought to offer it, and she watched Taejun's operation reorganize around a new axis with the efficiency of a machine that had done this before, that had protocols for the thing that was happening, and she thought about how surreal it was to sit in a kitchen making toast while people around you prepared for the kind of confrontation that had a body count. Cho identified the second source at the 50-minute mark. He came to her directly, which she noted not to Taejun first. The younger one, he said, Park Min-jun, 26. He's been with us 14 months. His jaw was tight in a way that suggested the tightness was covering something larger. 18 months ago, his younger sister was in a car accident in Seoul. The medical bills were significant. Someone paid them 8 months ago through a charity fund that traces back eventually to a holding company connected to Han's personal finances. Nia looked at him. He's not a traitor. He's a man who needed money for his sister's medical care, and someone found him at the right moment. Cho met her eyes. Yes. Does Taejun know? Not the sister part. Not yet. She held his gaze. Tell him the sister part. Cho was quiet for a moment. Tell him, she said. It matters. How he handles this man matters, and he needs the full picture to make the right call. Cho nodded once and went. She turned back to her toast. 20 minutes later, Tai-jun came to the kitchen. He looked different. Something had shifted in the set of his face, something she couldn't name precisely. Cho told me, he said. I know. You could have let me. No, she said. I couldn't. He stood at the island across from her and looked at the counter for a moment. I'm not going to. He stopped. He'll be removed from operations. He won't be. Another stop. He's not a soldier. He was a man who made a desperate decision and someone exploited it. Yes, she said. He looked at her. You're different than I expected. From what? From anyone. He said it simply, without performance, and looked away. She finished her toast. The call came at 11:47 a.m. Cho's voice on Tae-jun's phone, short and fast. Han had moved. 4 vehicles, 12 men, converging on Honggang Restaurant on 52nd Street from 2 directions. Han himself was in the second vehicle. He had brought himself. Tai-jun was already in his coat. He stopped in the doorway of the kitchen. Stay here, he said. Cho is staying with you. 3 men on the door. She looked at him. Be careful. He held her gaze for 1 second. Then he was gone. The apartment closed around her like a held breath. She heard it in pieces, the way you hear a story told by someone who was there but is still processing what they're meant. Cho relayed it in short updates, not out of kindness, but because it was his job to keep her informed and calm, and he was efficient at both. Tae-jun's people had been in position inside Honggang for 90 minutes before Han's vehicles arrived. The restaurant was closed for a private event, a legitimate cover. The kitchen staff sent home early with a story about a pipe issue. Inside were 8 of Tae-jun's most trusted people, the ones whose files Cho had reviewed personally, whose finances were clean, whose loyalty had been tested by time and proximity rather than assumption. Han sent 3 men in through the front. Tae-jun let them come. The confrontation happened in the restaurant's private dining room, which had 1 door and no exterior windows. Han had made the calculation that Tai-jun would be undermanned and rattled, that the breach in his inner circle had cost him enough that he'd be defensive rather than tactical. He had miscalculated, and Cho relayed the moment Han understood the miscalculation in 3 words. It's contained. Mostly. Mostly. Nia looked up from the counter. Mostly, she said. Cho's face was controlled. 2 of ours are injured, not critically. One of Han's people got out through a service exit before the building was secured. Unknown current location. Han. In custody. Tai-jun has him. She exhaled. And Tai-jun. A pause that lasted exactly 1 second too long. He took a hit, Cho said. Early in the confrontation. He's mobile, he's functional. How bad? I don't have the full picture yet. Cho. He's functional, Cho said again, and his voice had just enough certainty in it that she believed the functional part, if not the complete part. She sat very still on the kitchen stool and put both hands flat on the counter and breathed. The clock on the microwave read 12:31 p.m. He came back at 2:15. She heard the door and heard his voice and the particular way the apartment's energy reorganized around him, and she stayed where she was at the kitchen island because she had decided she was not going to run to the door like someone who had not spent the last 2.5 hours holding herself together with both hands. He came into the kitchen. He had changed his shirt. She could tell because the tear in the left shoulder of the previous one had been visible in her memory, and the shirt he was wearing now was clean. But the color of his face was wrong, slightly gray, the gray of someone running on adrenaline that has recently begun to run out. And he was favoring his left side, not dramatically, the subtle compensation of someone trained to hide it. She got off the stool. Sit down, she said. Sit down, Tai-jun. He sat on the stool she'd vacated. She went around the island and stood beside him and looked at his left side. Show me. He opened the shirt. She'd been right about the change. This one was clean, white, already showing a bloom of red at the lower left that he'd done a poor job of hiding. That was dressed, she said. At the restaurant. By who? One of the men, who isn't a medical professional. No. She went to the bathroom, got the first aid kit for the second time in less than 24 hours, came back. She replaced the dressing properly, working quickly and without commentary. He sat still. His breathing was even and controlled, and she could feel, through her hands, the effort that control was costing him. Han Sung-il, she said while she worked. Secured. Chang Ho is sending people. He'll be taken back to Seoul and dealt with through internal channels. A pause. The Sungdo faction dissolves without him. The men who followed him are contractors, not loyalists. They'll disperse. The one who got out through the service exit. Found 40 minutes ago. He's not a problem anymore. She taped the dressing, stepped back. Lee Dong-hyun, she said. He looked up at her. Voluntarily came in this morning. He wants to negotiate. Negotiate what? His way out of whatever Han was going to do to him for going off script. He paused. He knew, when he called you at the cabin, that he was ending his contract with Han. He was trying to find a way to land somewhere safe. She looked at him. Is he safe? That depends on what he can give us. Taejun. He's not going to be harmed, he said. He went off script because he wouldn't put a pregnant woman in danger. That's a line I can respect. She held his gaze for a moment. She pulled a stool up and sat down beside him. Not across the island, beside him. Close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his face clearly, the real version that he didn't usually let be visible. Tell me how bad the hit is, she said. The real answer. 2 ribs, possibly cracked. The laceration is deep but clean. Nothing internal. He held her eyes. I've had worse. That's not reassuring. I know. It's still true. She looked at his face. The cut from the night before, properly taped now, had started to bruise along the edge. His eyes were the tired eyes of someone who had not slept more than an hour and had spent the morning doing things she didn't have the full picture of, and probably shouldn't. She thought about the document with her name on it and the blank line for the baby's name. She thought about 3 hours up a county road and cold coffee. She thought about what Camille had said on the first night. You need to tell him. She looked at him and said nothing for a moment because there were too many things to say, and she didn't know which one was the right one to lead with. And she was 27 years old and 8 weeks pregnant, and she had spent the last 2 weeks learning that the world was larger and more dangerous than she'd known, and that she had more capacity to navigate it than she'd believed, and that the man sitting beside her, gray-faced and cracked-ribbed and honest in his particular limited way, was not what she'd thought he was on the night she'd walked into the rain. Not better, exactly. Something more complicated than better. Something that required more from her than she'd been planning to give. The appearance, she said. We still need to do it. He looked at her. You still want to. Han is contained, but the story is still out there. The factions version, the narrative they were building. We do the appearance, and we cut it off before it takes root. She held his gaze. 2 days, like we said. You need rest. So do you. We both need 2 days. She looked at him. Can you stand up straight in 2 days? His mouth moved. Not quite a smile. Yes. Then we're doing it in 2 days. He looked at her for a long moment. What changed? He said. She looked at him. At the cracked ribs he was breathing carefully around. At the taped cut. At the eyes. Nothing changed, she said. I'm still angry about the gala. I'm still angry about the documents. She held his gaze. But I watched you build a legal firewall around my child at your own expense, and I watched you go into a restaurant with 1 man out of position and 2 ribs that were probably already hurting, and I watched you come back. She paused. That's not nothing. The apartment was quiet. Outside the window, the Upper East Side moved through its ordinary afternoon entirely unaware. What I said in Connecticut, Taejun said, on the porch, about not going away. I remember. I meant it then. I mean it more now. He held her gaze and his voice was very level, the level of something that has been decided rather than something being decided. I don't know how to be what you need. I don't have a model for it, but I'm going to spend whatever time I have learning, and I'm going to get it wrong, and I'm going to tell you when I get it wrong. A pause. That's what I can offer. It's not enough. I know that. She looked at him. She thought, It might be enough. She didn't say that yet. It was too early to say that yet, and she was not a woman who said things before they were ready to be said. Go lie down, she said. Cracked ribs need rest. He didn't argue. He stood, carefully, and she watched him walk toward the bedroom with the controlled movement of a man managing pain he had no intention of displaying, and at the doorway he stopped. Naya. She looked up. Thank you, he said. For the dressing, for... He stopped. For still being here. She held his gaze. 2 days, she said. Then we finish this. He nodded once and went. She sat at the kitchen island alone in the quiet apartment and put both hands flat on the counter and felt the nausea, the background constant of it, and beneath it something else. Not the fear she'd been carrying, not the anger, but something newer and more uncertain, something that felt like the very early stages of a decision she hadn't made yet, but was getting closer to every hour. She put one hand on her stomach. Outside, the winter light was going gold over the park. She thought, 2 days? She thought, and then whatever comes after. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She looked at it. Camille. Still alive? She picked up the phone and typed back. Still alive. Tell you everything soon. She set the phone down. In the bedroom, she could hear Tae-jun moving carefully, the sound of him lowering himself onto the bed with the deliberate caution of cracked ribs, and then silence. She stayed at the island a while longer. She was still sitting there, thinking about blank lines on legal documents and names that hadn't been chosen yet, when Cho knocked on the kitchen door frame, and she looked up, and his face had the controlled expression that meant something had happened. And before he spoke, she felt the shift in the air, the particular heaviness of a situation that is not yet finished, that has one more thing to give. Cho's face in the kitchen doorway held the specific stillness of a man who had learned, over 9 years, to deliver bad information without flinching. Chung-ho's people arrived early, he said. They're at the restaurant now. Han Sung-il is gone. Nia looked at him. Gone as in transferred. Gone as in released. Cho's voice was flat. Chang-ho made a decision we weren't consulted on. Han is his wife's brother. The family made a calculation. She was off the stool before she'd decided to move. Wake him up. Miss Okafor, wake Tae-jun up, Cho. Right now. She didn't wait. She went to the bedroom doorway and knocked twice, hard, and pushed the door open. Tae-jun was on his back on the bed with his eyes already open. She suspected he hadn't been asleep at all, had been lying there in the dark, running through outcomes the way he always ran through outcomes, quietly and without rest. He looked at her face and sat up. The wince was brief and controlled. Han is out, she said. He was standing in 4 seconds. The wince happened again, and she watched him override it with the practiced efficiency of someone who had been overriding pain for a long time. Chang-ho. Cho says family decision. He said something in Korean under his breath, quiet and precise, that she didn't need to understand. Where's Han now? He said. Cho appeared in the doorway. Unknown. Chang-ho's people moved him before our contact at the restaurant could establish position. He had a 40-minute head start. Tae-jun was already buttoning his shirt. Lee Dong-hyun. Still in custody? Cooperative. Pull everything he has on Han's secondary locations. Properties, contacts, vehicles. Everything. He looked at Cho. And get Chang-ho on the phone. He won't. Get him on the phone anyway. Cho moved. Tae-jun finished the shirt, reached for his jacket, and Naya stepped forward and put her hand on his arm. He stopped. Your ribs, she said, are cracked, not broken. He met her eyes. I'm functional. You said that word before. Functional. She held his gaze. I need you more than functional tonight. I need you careful. He looked at her for a moment. Something in his face did the thing it did. The shift, the underneath version of him appearing briefly at the surface. I know, he said. I'll be careful. She let go of his arm. He went. The call with Chang-ho lasted 11 minutes. She could hear Tae-jun's voice from the kitchen. Not the words, just the register, the controlled anger that expressed itself as precision rather than volume. When he came back to the main room, his jaw was set, and his eyes had the flat quality she associated with him having received information that confirmed something he'd already suspected and hadn't wanted to be right about. Chung-ho says Han has agreed to leave New York permanently, he said. Return to Seoul, remove himself from Sungdo's American operations entirely. Chung-ho considers the matter resolved. Naya looked at him. And you? I consider it a temporary solution built on a family's unwillingness to address its own rot. He set his phone on the island. Han agreed too easily. A man who put this much into motion doesn't walk away because his brother-in-law tells him to. He's going to try again. Not immediately. He needs to rebuild. He lost people today, lost Baek, lost the faction's operational capacity in this city. He paused. But eventually, yes. So what do we do? He looked at her. We do what we planned, the appearance, on our timeline, and we use the 2 days before it to make very certain that Han understands what trying again would cost him. How? By making sure the right people know what he did, not the press, the organizations. Every major syndicate that operates in this corridor knows what happened today before midnight. Han's value as an operator drops to zero. No one will resource him. No one will partner with him. He paused. He'll have his life and his freedom and no capacity to threaten anyone worth threatening. For a man like Han, that's the worst outcome. Worse than custody. Nia thought about it. You're not going after him. I'm destroying his ability to function. That's more permanent than going after him. She held his gaze. And Chang-ho? The alliance is finished. He said it without visible emotion, which was its own kind of emotion. 8 months of work. Su-yan's, whatever Su-yan's interest was. All of it. He looked at the island. Chung-ho made his choice. I'll make mine. I'm sorry, she said. He looked up. The surprise on his face was brief but real. For what? That you lost something you worked for because of me. You didn't... I was the leverage, she said. I know that. If you hadn't been, he said, I wouldn't have known Han was in my walls. I wouldn't have known about Baek. I would have formalized the Chang-ho alliance and built on a foundation with a crack running through the middle of it. He held her gaze. You didn't cost me the alliance. Han's existence cost me the alliance. And Han's exposure is the only thing that came out of this that I can call a genuine advantage. She was quiet. You're not leverage, he said. You were never leverage to me. I need you to know that. She looked at him for a long moment. I know, she said. And she did. She had known it for a while, maybe since Connecticut, maybe since she'd read the legal documents with the blank line where the baby's name should go. She had known it and held it at a distance because knowing it required her to do something with it, and she hadn't been ready to do anything with it yet. She was getting closer to ready. Not yet, but closer. Go sit down, she said. Cracked ribs and a standing argument are a bad combination. His mouth moved. She was learning the vocabulary of his almost expressions. That one was the almost smile she liked least because it made it hardest to stay at a distance. He sat down. The 2 days moved like the days immediately after a storm. The specific exhaustion of aftermath when the adrenaline has finished and the body begins its accounting. Taejun worked from the apartment, phone calls and controlled meetings with people who came and went with the quiet efficiency of a machine resetting itself. Lee Dong-hyun was processed and released with terms that Taejun explained to her briefly and without detail. The key point being that Lee had given them everything he had and had been given away out of New York in exchange. She thought about the man who had called her at the cabin with 3 days' warning and decided she was satisfied with that outcome. Dr. Song came on the second morning. She examined Nia thoroughly and efficiently, the way she did everything, and declared the baby's progress normal and the mother's blood pressure higher than ideal, but within acceptable range given circumstances. And she said the word circumstances with the inflection of someone who had seen a great many circumstances in this particular orbit and was not easily surprised by them. First trimester nausea should begin to ease around week 10, she said, writing something in her notes. Eat small amounts consistently rather than large amounts sporadically. Sleep when possible. She paused, pen still. The stress load has been significant. The body adapts, but it has limits. I know, Nia said. I'm not asking you to eliminate stress. I'm asking you to be aware of limits. Dr. Song looked at her over the notepad. You're in a situation that requires you to function. Function is sustainable. Running at full capacity indefinitely is not. I've been running at full capacity for a while. I know. A pause. So has he. She said it without inflection, a statement of observation, and went back to her notes. After she left, Nia sat on the edge of the bed and thought about limits and what sustainable meant in the context of where she was and what she was carrying and who she was carrying it with. She thought about Crown Heights and the flower shop and the van with the broken window that was still in a parking garage in Midtown, intact. Tae-jun had confirmed it was clean, had sent people to retrieve it the morning after the restaurant, and the key was on the nightstand beside her. She looked at it sometimes, the small brass key that meant she still had something that was entirely hers. She called her mother that evening. Her mother's name was Adieze Okafor, and she was 61 years old, and she had raised Nia alone from the age of 7, and she had the particular quality of someone who had already weathered the worst thing and knew that most subsequent things were manageable by comparison. She listened to everything without interrupting, the way Camille did, the way certain women who have survived significant things learn to listen. When Nia finished, there was a pause. "Is he good to you?" her mother said. "It's complicated." "Most things worth anything are complicated." "Is he good to you?" Nia thought about legal documents and cold coffee and 3 hours up a county road and cracked ribs carefully managed. "He's learning to be," she said. Another pause. "That's not nothing." "No," Nia said. "That's what I keep coming back to." Her mother was quiet for a moment. "You always were the one who needed to see a thing from every angle before you decided. Even as a little girl, you'd stand in front of a problem and just look at it until you knew." "I'm still looking." "I know, but Nia." Her mother's voice was warm and precise in the way it was when she was about to say something she'd been holding. "You called me 2 hours before you told me you were pregnant. I've known since you said hello." Nia closed her eyes. "You said hello the way you said hello when you were 12 and broke my good dish and were trying to decide how to tell me," her mother said. Same voice. "I didn't break anything." "You broke your own plan," her mother said. "And I think it scared you, but some plans need breaking." Nia sat on the edge of the bed with the key on the nightstand and her mother's voice in her ear and the particular quality of silence that belongs to people who have known each other long enough that silence is also a form of communication. "I'll bring him to Philadelphia," Nia said finally, "when this is settled, whenever you're ready. It might be a while." "I'm not going anywhere," her mother said. "Neither are you." Tmosan. The appearance happened on a Tuesday. Not a gala. Not a staged event with photographers arranged in advance. Nia had been specific about that, and Tae-jun had been specific about honoring it. They walked into the lobby of a midtown office building at 11 in the morning. Tae-jun had a meeting with his real estate attorneys, a legitimate appointment that had been on the calendar for 3 weeks. And they walked in together, and they did not hide and they did not perform. She wore her own clothes. Dark slacks. A camel coat she'd bought herself 3 months ago with money from a wedding installation in Park Slope. Her own shoes. Her hair down. No borrowed dress, no pinned waist, nothing that belonged to anyone else. There were 2 photographers outside the building. She didn't know if Tae-jun had arranged them or if they were simply there the way photographers were simply present in certain parts of Midtown when certain people moved through them. She looked at them directly and did not smile and did not look away. And Tae-jun walked beside her with his hand at the small of her back, and the cracked ribs doing whatever they were doing under his jacket, managed and invisible, and they went inside. The photographs ran that afternoon. She saw them on Camille's phone when Camille came to the apartment that evening, because Camille had insisted on coming and Tae-jun had not suggested otherwise. The photographs were ordinary. A man and a woman entering a building on a Tuesday morning. Her face was clear and calm and looking directly at the camera. His hand was at her back. Neither of them was hiding. The caption on one outlet read, "Kang Tae-jun seen publicly with companion amid recent business uncertainty." Another, "Who was the woman at Tae-jun's side?" The framing was speculative and slightly breathless, the way tabloid framing always was. And underneath it, there was nothing. No hidden pregnant girlfriend in hiding, no controlled captive, no leverage. Just 2 people walking into a building on a Tuesday. Han's narrative had nowhere to land. Camille sat at the kitchen island with her phone and looked at the photographs for a long time, then looked at Nia. "You look good," she said. I look like myself, Naya said. That's what I said. Camille set the phone down. So, she looked across the island to where Tae-jun was standing with coffee, because he had offered to leave them alone and Nia had said it wasn't necessary. You're the father. Tae-jun looked at her. Yes. You put her through a significant amount of difficulty. Yes. She's my best friend. I know. Camille picked up her own coffee. She looked at him for a moment with the direct, unimpressed attention of someone who had known Nia since they were 19 and had carried her through the hard nights and the wrong decisions and the right ones. Then she looked at Nia. He makes good coffee, she said. He does, Nia agreed. That's not sufficient. I know. It's a start. Camille looked at Tae-jun again. You hurt her again. I know, he said. He held Camille's gaze without deflecting. I know what it costs. I'm not going to pretend I won't ever get it wrong, but I know what it costs. Camille was quiet for a moment. Fine, she said. She picked up her coffee. Show me the apartment. I want to see where my godchild is going to be visiting. Well, the weeks that followed had a different texture than anything that had come before. Not easy. Nothing about it was easy. Nia's lease came up and she negotiated it from Tae-jun's kitchen table with the landlord on the phone, fighting for $200 a month the way she always fought for it. And she won. The flower shop stayed open, run by her part-time assistant Maya, while Nia moved between the apartment and Crown Heights and the small rhythms of a life she was reconfiguring rather than replacing. She did not move in. She kept the apartment in Crown Heights, the key, the van with its fixed window. Tae-jun had sent someone to fix it without asking, and she'd been angry for 20 minutes and then let it go because the window had been broken since March, and it was November, and it was cold. She kept her own space and her own hours, and the right to show up at the Upper East Side apartment or not show up, as she chose. He never made her feel the choice was unwelcome either way. That was the thing she was learning, slowly, and with the caution of someone who had burned themselves on a similar surface before. That Tae-jun did not pressure in the ways she'd expected. He pushed in other ways, control, information asymmetry, the management instinct that she had to correct repeatedly and that he had to unlearn repeatedly, in the ongoing negotiation of two people trying to build something out of materials that were partly incompatible. But he did not push her toward him. He had said he wasn't going away, and then he had simply stayed, and the staying had accumulated into something she could feel the weight of. She was 12 weeks when the nausea finally eased, almost exactly as Dr. Song had predicted. She was 13 weeks when she told him the name. They were in the Connecticut house. He'd taken her back once things were settled, because she'd said she wanted to see it without the fear attached to it, and it had been her choice, and he'd understood why. They were on the porch in the November cold, the trees bare now, the creek louder without the leaves to muffle it. Emeka, she said. He turned to look at her. It means something in Igbo, she said, my father's language, my grandmother's. It means great deeds, something like that. It means a person who carries something forward. She paused. I've been thinking about it for a while. He looked at her for a long moment. His face was doing the thing it rarely did, the thing she'd learned to recognize as the deepest version of his response, when whatever he was feeling reached the surface in spite of rather than because of him. Emeka, he said. Emeka Tai. She held his gaze. Both names. Both of where he comes from. He was quiet for long enough that she heard the creak below the hill and a car somewhere on the county road and the sound of the wind through empty branches. Yes, he said. It came out quieter than she'd expected. Yes, that's... He stopped. The stop was not the controlled stop of someone managing their expression. It was the involuntary stop of someone who has been caught off guard by the scale of a feeling they didn't anticipate. She let him have the moment. She was learning when to push and when to let things breathe, and this was a moment that needed to breathe. After a while, he said, I want to be here for all of it, not the parts I can manage, all of it. I know, she said. That's why I'm telling you the name. He looked at the trees. I'm going to get things wrong, he said. The fatherhood parts, He paused. I don't have a reference for what that looks like, what it's supposed to look like. My father was... He stopped again, and this stop was a different kind. My father was effective at running things, at building structures that lasted, at everything except being present, she said. Yes. You already know what you're not trying to be, she said. That's more than some people start with. He looked at her. It's not enough, he said. No, she agreed, but it's where you start. The cold had come up while they'd been talking, the sharp edge that came after sunset in November in the Hudson Valley. She could see her breath. He shifted slightly, and she could tell from the micro-adjustment in his posture that the ribs were still making themselves known, would be for several more weeks according to Dr. Song, the kind of thing you learn to carry rather than wait for it to finish. She thought that was probably true of a lot of things. She stood up. Come inside. It's cold. He stood. Carefully, the practiced caution that had become unremarkable, just part of how he moved now. At the door, she stopped and turned. The gala, she said. He looked at her. I need you to understand that I'm not over it, she said. The kiss, the cameras, all of it. I understand the explanation. I believe the explanation. And I'm still not over it, and I might not be for a while, and that's not something you get to put a timeline on. I know. And the documents. I know. And every other decision you made without telling me. I know, Nia. She held his gaze. I'm telling you because I don't want to pretend those things are resolved. We're going to carry them for a while, both of us. Yes. And we're going to keep going anyway. He looked at her. The underneath version of his face, the honest one, the one she'd seen a handful of times, and that cost him something to show. Yes, he said. She turned and went inside. He followed. June came in warm and slow, the particular warmth of early summer in New York before the heat became something to endure, and Emekate arrived on a Thursday morning at 6:47 a.m. in a private hospital suite in Manhattan. The labor was 11 hours. She did not ask Taijun to leave, and he did not offer to, which she registered as a form of growth for both of them. He stayed, and he was not useful in any technical sense. He didn't know what to do with his hands, and he said the wrong thing twice and corrected it and said nothing for long stretches, and that was actually better, the saying nothing, being present without filling the space with management. When Emeka arrived, he was small and loud and covered in the ordinary debris of arrival, and the nurses did what nurses do, and Dr. Song was there, unimpressed and efficient and exactly what Nia needed her to be, and then there was a baby on her chest. She had thought she would cry. She didn't. She felt something larger and quieter than crying, something that had no name she knew yet, and she looked at the small face on her chest and felt the enormous ordinary weight of a specific life beginning. She looked up. Taejun was standing at the side of the bed. His face had done something she had never seen it do, had shed every version of itself, the controlled one and the operational one and the almost smiling one and even the underneath honest one, and what was left was something that had no strategy in it at all. Just a man looking at his son for the first time, cracked completely open by something 9 months of preparation had not made him ready for. Come here, she said. He sat on the edge of the bed. She could see his hands, steady, always steady, the hands of someone trained to steadiness. And she saw that they were not entirely steady right now. Hold him, she said. You won't. Hold him. He took the baby with the careful, almost frightened deliberateness of someone handling something irreplaceable, which was correct. And Emeka made a sound and turned his face toward the warmth, and Taejun's hands adjusted automatically, instinctively, in a way that had nothing to do with training or strategy or calculation. She watched his face. The man who had built a criminal empire across the eastern seaboard, who had run operations in 3 cities simultaneously, who had taken a bullet and a pair of cracked ribs and never once looked like he didn't know what he was doing. That man was completely undone by 7 pounds of new person wrapping one hand around his finger. Emeka's hand was very small. Taejun looked at it for a long time. He didn't say anything. She didn't need him to. Outside the hospital windows, early June moved through Manhattan in the particular silver-gold way of mornings that don't know yet what the day will do to them. The city was already making its sounds, traffic, a siren somewhere distant, the ordinary unceasing noise of a place that doesn't stop for anything, not for love, not for grief, not for the arrival of one small person who doesn't know yet what world he's in. Nia leaned back against the pillow. She was exhausted in the deepest, cleanest way she could remember being exhausted. the exhaustion of something finished, something real, something that had required everything and had been worth it. She thought about the hotel bathroom with the positive test and the burgundy dress and the rain. She thought about the greyhound in the dark and the cabin and burned eggs and a stranger's voice on an untraceable phone. She thought about legal documents and blank lines and the name she'd chosen and the word mother in a font she hadn't picked but had decided to keep. She thought about the distance between who she was that night in October and who she was now, and it was not a distance you could measure in months or in the ordinary units of time. It was the kind of distance that only exists inside a person, that doesn't show on the outside but changes everything about how the outside feels. She had not become someone else. She was still the woman from Crown Heights, with the flower shop, and the van, and the borrowed silk ribbons. She was still 27 years old, and she was still learning, still angry about some things, and still undecided about others, still carrying things she wasn't over yet. She was also, now, Emeka's mother. Both of those things were true at the same time, and neither one canceled the other. "Taejun," she said. He looked up from the baby's face. "You're going to be terrified for the rest of your life," she said. "Every parent is. It doesn't go away." He looked at her. "I know. But you're not going to be your father." He was quiet for a moment, looked at Emeka. "I don't know how to be certain of that." "You show up," she said. "Even when you don't know what to do. Even when you get it wrong. You show up and you stay." She met his eyes. "You've been practicing that part." Something moved across his face. The honest version, the underneath one. "Yeah," he said. Quiet. "I have." Emeka made a small sound, not a cry, something more like a question. Taejun looked down at him, adjusted his hands. The baby's hand was still curled around his finger. Nia watched the most dangerous man in New York hold his son with the terrified, careful reverence of someone who understands for the first time what it means to have something to lose that he would never, for any reason, choose to protect himself from. She let her eyes close. Not from exhaustion, exactly. From something that felt like the first real quiet she'd had in 9 months. The specific peace that comes not from safety, she knew better now than to expect permanent safety, but from the knowledge that you are in the right place, at the right time, with the people who are yours, and that whatever comes next you will face it with your eyes open. She had learned a great many things since October. She had learned that hiding was not the same as safety, that anger was not the same as clarity, that understanding someone's reasons was not the same as forgiving them, and that both things could be true at the same time. That the most dangerous people were not always the ones who threatened you, but sometimes the ones who loved you so clumsily and so completely that they built walls around you without asking, and that the work of being loved by someone like that was the ongoing work of teaching them the difference between protecting and controlling. She had learned that her capacity was larger than she'd known. She had learned that Emekatai's father, for all his flaws and his silences and his instinct toward management over honesty, would stand between his child and anything that moved in the child's direction. She had seen that in a parking garage and a Connecticut house and a midtown restaurant and a hospital room at 6:47 in the morning. She had seen it clearly enough to trust it, if not yet to call it by the largest name. The largest name could wait. There was time. For now there was a June morning and a window and a city that didn't stop, and Emeka Tai, who had been carried through rain and Greyhound buses and cracked ribs and an October gala and 12 days of silence and a parking structure at dawn and everything else, who had arrived anyway, on time, loud and whole, and entirely himself. She heard Taejun speaking to the baby in Korean, very quietly, something she couldn't hear clearly and didn't try to. It wasn't for her. It was between the two of them, the first conversation, the one that would take a lifetime to finish. Outside, the snow that had fallen all night on a different winter was gone now. The world was warm. The city moved. She let herself rest.